creatures. It just ensures that they also have a food supply that lasts. So basically gardening.
Why do you enjoy seeing beavers?
That's an excellent question. I find being in nature and being on the river very calming. And there's just a childlike excitement that I get when I see wildlife. It's living its life, doing its own thing. I think we do sort of lose that childlike excitement when we grow up. And this is one of the ways that I tap back into it. Everything sort of makes sense when you're watching a baby beaver scratch its bum.
So I'm not seeing any beavers.
No, I think possibly it's getting a little late in the morning now for them. It's quite light, it's quite bright. They've probably had their activities and probably back in their lodge, so it might be time to head back.
Okay, well, I've seen 2 otters, 1 kingfisher, but no beavers. I'm going to mark this down as a successful wildlife trip.
Oh, I'm glad. It's been a really lovely way to spend a morning at least.
Never fear though, because the beavers might be out at dusk. Emily Knight was talking to Emma Brisdian there from the Rivers Trust.
29 minutes past 8 to the Sport and Carnival.
Good morning, thank you. Plenty of drama and excitement cross sport this weekend. In the FA Cup, it's Manchester United, Chelsea, Manchester City and Coventry City that make up the final 4 of the competition. Manchester United won a 7-goal thriller at Old Trafford, beating rivals Liverpool 4-3 in extra time of their quarter-final, while Chelsea defeated Leicester City 4-2 yesterday. West Ham had to settle for a point against Aston Villa in the Premier League after they had a late goal ruled out by VAR, meaning that game finished as a 1-1 draw. At Manchester City are level on points with Women's Super League leaders Chelsea after a 4-1 win over Brighton. Rugby Union's Six Nations provided plenty of last-minute drama too, with Ireland securing back-to-back titles after a slightly nervy end to their game against Scotland, winning by 17 points to 13. We can speak to the former Ireland winger Dennis Hickey the day after St Patrick's Day. Dennis, a whole weekend to celebrate Ireland's achievements. Does retaining the title in this way, particularly under pressure, secure Ireland's status as the leading team in the Northern Hemisphere now?
Yeah, I think it does, just about maybe. And I say the qualified way because I think Ireland, back-to-back championships on the back of a Grand Slam last year, they weren't able to replicate the Grand Slam this year. But they got out of the top so well, pushing defeat against France, to France in France, where they really dominated and kind of picked up where they left off in the World Cup. So the bigger picture is they're back-to-back champions. I think if you look a little bit closer, I think it's the Irish rugby supporters are honest, they'll probably see a team that their performance is probably deteriorating a little bit towards the end of the tournament. They were certainly stronger at the start than they were at the end, but they won't care too much about that on the back of back-to-back championships. But it's certainly been an interesting tournament for Ireland and for all the other nations as well, for different reasons.
Yeah, well, can I ask you about those other nations? Because it's interesting to sort of see how it pans out over the campaign. Who impressed you most by the end this weekend?
Well, I think the team that really came good in the tournament was England, and obviously Italy were hot on their heels for different reasons at different stages, I suppose, of their rugby evolution, particularly in the Six Nations tournament since Italy joined. I'll start with England. England, they stuttered at the start and received a lot of flack for their style of play as much as anything else. They have a hugely talented squad, but a lot of frustration in England with that they haven't been able to lock a really fantastic way of playing. But as the tournament wore on, they began to play better and better, and this was really the case when they turned over Ireland in Twickenham in dramatic fashion last week, and then they backed that up with a really exciting and fantastic performance in France. They ultimately fell short 31-33 in Lyon, but the performances were great, and of course you couldn't talk about progress and performance of the tournament without talking about Italy, and the best ever finish in the Six Nations. They were very unlucky not to beat France. They obviously beat Scotland and they beat Wales to finish the tournament on a high, beating Wales, of course, in Cardiff. So I think those two teams will have got a lot of satisfaction to see the tournament. I think England are a better place than they were going into the tournament, and likewise Italy after a very disappointing World Cup. They will be very happy with the quality of their performances throughout the tournament.
You talked about the evolution of Italy there. What about Wales? We sort of seem to have had a Six Nations quite not long after the end of the Rugby Union World Cup. It's quite obvious that some of the teams are at different stages in that next World Cup cycle, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone more so than Wales. They've really blooded a lot of players in this tournament, and it's very, very hard for the Welsh players and the Welsh rugby public to accept where they are at the moment, because they're such a proud rugby nation and rugby means so much in Wales. But they ultimately took the wooden spoon this year. They couldn't register a win, and I think people are worried about the underlying problems in Welsh rugby and how that's now manifesting itself in the performances of the national team. They have a lot. They probably seem to have the longest road ahead of them, but they have to start somewhere after the World Cup, and they're certainly they certainly got a lot of work to go. Warren Gatland has a big job in front of them. Do they have the players? They still played with a lot of pride, but the level of performance that they were able to muster this year was just not what the other teams were.
Well, Warren Gatland offering his resignation as well after getting the wooden spoon, but that was refused by the IOW. Ziggy, thank you very much for your time this morning. Just one other line to mention, which is that the most successful British female Olympian of all time, with 5 Olympic gold medals and 7 World Championship titles, Dame Laura Kenny has told the BBC that she has decided to retire and will not go to this year's Paris Olympics. Racing tips to finish: Southwell 1:55, number 1 Samurai 1, and Fotwell 3:18, number 4 Only Fools.
Thanks, Carthy. And here's Tom Sutcliffe to tell us about today's Start the Week.
Morning. As President Putin celebrates scraping through to another election victory, we'll nail better this time. We're going to be talking about disinformation, fake news and media manipulation with 2 connoisseurs of the state's ability to rewrite the facts: the Ukrainian novelist Andrei Kurkov and Peter Pomerantsev, whose new book, How to Win an Information War, looks to a British propagandist of the Second World War for lessons about our dangerous susceptibility to stories that tell us what we want to believe. Joining them is the journalist Charlotte G, who reports on AI's growing ability to forge alternative political realities that are almost indistinguishable from the real thing. Start the week just after 9. The truth and nothing but.
Of course, we'd expect nothing less to the weather. Dry and fine start for most, turning cloudy though, wet and windy from the west in the afternoon.
You're listening to Today on Radio 4 with Justin Webb and Katia Adler. It is 25 to 9 and time for a summary of the news from Lisa Costello.
Vladimir Putin has thanked Russians for their trust and support after claiming victory in the country's presidential election. With all his main opponents either dead, in prison or banned from standing, the result was seen as inevitable. Western nations said the vote was neither free nor fair. The head of Russia's Electoral Commission has put the turnout at more than 77%, a post-Soviet record. The Israeli army says it's gained control of the largest hospital in Gaza after an overnight military operation. It says 80 people have been detained and others have been killed at the Al-Shifa hospital, where it claimed Hamas fighters had regrouped. The government's Rwanda bill returns to the Commons today after hitting a roadblock in the House of Lords. Ministers will try to overturn 10 proposed changes put forward by peers. The spending watchdog has warned that a lower telecoms
organisation have accused Israel of war crimes. Let's talk to Rushdie Abu Alouf, who is the BBC's Gaza correspondent, joining us now from Istanbul, where he is at the moment. Rushdie, what can you tell us, in fact, can you tell us anything for certain about what has been happening overnight and what the situation is now?
Yeah, I mean, now the Israeli troops are inside, fully control the Shifa hospital. I was able to receive some recorded message from inside the hospital this morning from somebody who's among thousands of people who are taking the hospital as a shelter, because you know the widespread destruction of Gaza left people homeless. place, so they decided to take it as a shelter. He said that Israeli troops are inside, searching from room to room in the compound and arresting people, questioning people, and he claimed that some people were killed or injured inside the compound itself, which is something we can't really verify for certain. What happened is around 2:30 in the morning Gaza time, where about it's the holy month of Ramadan, people were about to have their suhoor, the pre-dawn meal before they start their fast. Suddenly there was Israeli tanks moving towards the hospital and surrounding the hospital from all sides. I mean, some videos shot from outside show the explosions and heavy gunfire around the place, and then by loudspeaker the Israeli army was asking the people inside they can leave, and we have seen hundreds of people, in the dark, walking through at the Latin Street nearby and towards the eastern side of Gulf City. Of course, the hospital is in the western side. The people were, using their mobile flashlight, and they were, carrying their belongings and their stuff, and they were leaving the place. The Shifa hospital is like the biggest medical center in Gaza, and it was attacked by Israel before, and it was almost not functioning for a very long time.
But Rushdie, sorry to interrupt you, there were exchanges of fire. In other words, it does look, doesn't it, as if Hamas fighters were there and were fighting back.
Yeah, I mean, the people from inside the hospital were hearing some gunfire outside when the Israeli army started to move. There was clearly sound of exchange of fire, but it was not clear whether it was inside the hospital or outside. By then there was the tanks still around the hospital, and I mean a couple of people that they were recorded messages or were able to hear from. They were saying that they are hiding in the hospital. They could hear gunfire around it, but they can't, verify exactly what's
exactly
happening.
Where it was coming from. No, understood. And Rushdie Abu-Alu, thank you.
It's 20 to 9. Deep sea mining has been proposed and rigorously opposed for quite some time. Some argue the seafloor is a promising source of minerals you can also find on land that are imperative for the green revolution. They're used to make wind turbines and batteries used to power electric vehicles. But environmentalists argue we don't know enough about the ecosystems on the seafloor to guarantee that mining won't cause irreparable harm. To date, there are no international licensing frameworks in place that could dictate the rules of any mining operations. Today, the International Seabed Association begins a new round of talks in Kingston, Jamaica, hoping to do just that. Earlier, I spoke to Jared Barron, the CEO and chairman of the metals company, and Louisa Casson, the global project leader for Greenpeace's Stop Deep Sea Mining campaign. I started by asking her, Louisa's at the Jamaica conference, what she believes is at stake.
If the mining goes ahead, then we are risking severe and irreversible harm to the oceans. It means sending tank-sized excavators 5 kilometres below the surface of the waves to scrape up the bottom of the ocean. And these are our planet's last remaining pristine habitats. They're some of our most ancient ecosystems, which have been undisturbed since the dawn of time. They're thriving with fascinating creatures, and yet companies like the metals company could rip them up in an instant if they get their way. I think it really begs the question, is nowhere sacred? This is the deep ocean. It's evolved over millions of years. Last year, scientists at the Natural History Museum announced they discovered 5,000 new species in the very area that's being targeted for deep sea mining. These species have been found nowhere else in our oceans. They were previously unknown to science, and they estimate that there are thousands more yet to be discovered, which means that if deep sea mining goes ahead, we could lose species that we haven't even learned exist yet. Thankfully, we're now seeing a growing number of governments calling to put a halt on this industry before it can start and cause any harm.
That includes the UK government. Jared Barron, why do you think that the mining in the deep ocean on the seabed, why should that go ahead in your opinion?
We want to move away from fossil fuels. Everyone agrees that the right thing to be doing. But to enable that to happen, we're going to need to build an enormous amount of new infrastructure, ranging from batteries for electric vehicles to renewable power and solar power. And on top of that, we have an ongoing demand for metals by the ongoing industrialization in the developing world. And so if we look at the authoritative voices in this sector, like the International Energy Agency or the World Bank, they estimate that we will need to increase metal extraction, so mining, by 500 to 600% by 2040.
Forgive me, but rare earths and minerals that you need for wind turbines or for batteries for electric vehicles, those are found on land and in plentiful supply. So why endanger this delicate ecosystem, as Louisa has said?
And that is the exact point. You've hit on the point. These metals do exist in land, but in decreasing numbers, so the best ones have already been mined. And what we're doing now is pushing into our most pristine ecosystems. And the first principle logic here is that we should be carrying out extractive industries in parts of the planet with the least life, not the most life. And if we look at where all of the growth in nickel production is coming from now, it's coming from rainforest nickel. And that material sits underneath the rainforest. And those rainforests are our richest carbon sinks. They are the home to the most biodiversity on our planet, as well as indigenous communities. And so does it make sense that we should be going to these parts of our planet where there is the most life and biodiversity and sequestered carbon, when we have this very large, abundant resource on the abyssal plain?
Louisa Casson, I know you'll have a lot to say in reply to Jared Barron just there, but before we do, just tell us briefly about the polymetallic nodules, because that's what you would be mining for. What do they look like, where exactly are they, and what do they offer you?
If I was with you, I'd hand you one. It's about the size of a potato, and they literally lie on the seafloor like golf balls on a driving range. There's one little patch. It's in the Pacific Ocean. It's about 1,000 miles off the coast of Mexico, where the nodules have very high grade of nickel and copper. They also contain high grades of cobalt and manganese. And so what we found is that we can pick up these rocks, and unlike what Louisa said, we don't go and scour the seafloor. Our machines fire a jet of water at these nodules, and it creates an inverse pressure, and we're able to lift them with minimal impact.
Louisa Casson, if I can turn to you, I mean, the way he's put it, it's either the deep ocean or rainforest, but the minerals need to be found.
Well, you don't save the rainforest by mining the deep sea. If deep sea mining starts, it wouldn't stop mining on land. It would simply expand the amount of our planet that is being ravaged. And, you know, this is setting up a really falsely narrow choice. If we look at where the real innovation in the green energy transition is happening from companies that are making batteries, that are making renewable energy and electric vehicles, they are not just saying they don't need deep sea mining, they're actively saying they would not source minerals from the deep sea because of the environmental risks. And I think it's, you know, a really disingenuous mischaracterization to claim that these are golf balls. They are what life centers around in the deep ocean. You have creatures living inside the nodules. You have creatures that are using them as the basis for reproduction. So, you know, the idea that we should be, you know, having to make this sort of falsely narrow choice, it ignores where the real innovation is, and that is from companies that are innovating. They're making new battery chemistries. So actually, the companies that are pumping out most electric vehicles at the moment aren't using the metals that you're trying to mine the deep sea for a variety of reasons, for cost reasons, safety reasons, and environmental reasons. And, you know, I think a few years ago we saw Jared Barron talk a lot about the need for cobalt because of all the problems of mining on land. But rather than turn to deep sea mining, we saw Tesla and Panasonic reducing it rather than signing up. We saw Apple looking to recycling cobalt. So there are so many more solutions, and I think this false choice is really disingenuous.
Louisa Casson and Jared Barron, thank you very much indeed.
And the time, 13 minutes to 9. An artwork that appeared overnight on the side of a building near Finsbury Park in London is thought to be by the street artist Banksy. It's a mass of green. It's been painted behind a cut-back mature tree, a real tree, so it looks like foliage, with a stencil of a person as well holding a pressure hose next to it. James Peake is on the line, who created the BBC Radio 4 series, The Banksy Story, and actually went to see it after he got a tip-off. James, good morning.
Morning, Justin.
What did
How are you?
Good, thanks. What did you think when you got there? Is it real? Oh, he's gone.
Well, it's certainly.
Oh, hang on a second. No, sorry.
No, I'm here.
Yeah, you were there. No, you were just quite properly thinking before you spoke, which I'm not used to on this programme. I should give you a chance to do that. Let's start again. Do you think it was real?
Do I think it's real? Well, it certainly bears all of the hope. Because one of the guys I spoke to yesterday said if it isn't Banksy, it's an amazing copycat. As you know, it has the right techniques. It's got an interesting and easy to understand message, a very clever location, and it really resonates the second you see it. And with Banksy, context is everything.
Yeah, the location is interesting, isn't it? I briefly described it, not very well. Give us a sense. You've seen the thing close up. Yeah. Give us a sense of the location, what's going on.
Okay, so a very, very busy, urban, built-up environment of Hornsey Road, and within that, there's some gardens of some social housing, and within that, there's a huge tree that's been very pollarded by Islington Council. And on the huge white wall behind this tree, you can see a sort of classic Banksy-style stencil of a figure, life-size figure, who's used a pressure washer or a fire extinguisher filled with paint to, as you say, spray up the wall, recreate the shape of the tree, the foliage, with this great sort of arterial spray of green paint about 30 or 40 feet high, but in exactly the same sort of virulent shade of green that Islington used for its social housing signs, which again dot the scene. So when you step back, it looks like the tree sort of burst into life, but in a noticeably fake and synthetic way. And yeah, it's pretty subtle for a massive tree, I'd say.
What do the locals make of it? Did you talk to them?
I spoke to a lot of people, yeah, there are a lot of people milling about yesterday afternoon thinking, goodness me, what is this? And of course it was St Patrick's Day yesterday, so there were a lot of Irish people wandering around. The green seemed to really appeal, of course, in that regard. Everyone's very excited because of the Banksy effect, and if he pops up in your neighbourhood and does a piece of art, then you know, it's immediately newsworthy and it draws attention to the environment. So very, very exciting.
And there will be people actually living the other side of the wall that he's painted on too. You wonder what they might make.
Well, apparently one of them has tweeted last night that looks like we're the new custodians of Banksy artwork. And of course that's his own reward. But I think trials and tribulations await. Because the thing is, I should say, I think he's really solved an emerging problem that he's got, which is that people obviously try and nick these string pieces because they're very valuable. I don't think anyone's going to be able to nick this, Justin. I think it's brilliant. You know, it doesn't make sense to steal it because the painted wall is just meaningless paint without the bare branches of the tree. And how are you going to steal a tree? So, yeah, it's fantastic. And it doesn't make sense without being in this very highly built-up urban environment in Islington with the buses and the lorries thundering past. So all the elements rely on each other. And so I think he has cracked something very important, which is make it unnickable. Even the daftest thief would realise that you can't take this out of where it is. It's got no context, it's got no meaning, it's got no value anywhere else.
All right, James Peake, creator of the BBC Radio 4 series, The Banksy Story, which is doubtless available on BBC Sounds. Thank you.
It's great, isn't it? It's unnickable, but it's sort of social comment and humour.
It's got it all.
Yes, it has it all. It's 9 minutes to 9. The man who put Birmingham on the map with Peaky Blinders, Stephen Knight, has a new BBC series, This Town. Set once again in Birmingham, it gets its premiere in the Town Hall there tomorrow night. It follows the creation of a band in 1981, the year of riots in Birmingham and elsewhere, and it's inspired by the iconic two-tone music scene coming out of the Midlands at the time. Nicola Stanbridge went on set to meet the cast and the creator, Stephen Knight.
This town is Birmingham in 1981, the making of a band against a backdrop of riots.
I've got to do something to stop myself thinking nothing is worth doing.
Tante, I've got lots of tunes in my head. I could do the tunes, and you could do the words. What do you say?
We join creator Stephen Knight and actors Eve Austin and Levi Brown.
I think we all have our songs that we have to get our feet into the roles.
The song I listen to most is Gangsters by the Specials.
On location in a dilapidated Victorian factory in Ladywood, Birmingham.
My character fixes factory roofs with her dad, and she came here with him and found it, and she has this idea of making music.
In the story, they will eventually form a band in a very wet coal warehouse. They're ordinary people who, as a consequence of circumstance, have no choice but to become famous.
It's a time of immense struggle. There's no sort of real hope for young people at the time. People are angry, not satisfied with their current situations, especially working class people. They find places like this to be together, to make noise, and to feel like they do something that matters.
What we've done is approached certain contemporary artists, really good ones, and said, imagine it's 1981.
Including the Rotherham musician's self-esteem.
You'll succeed at
What I'm trying to do is reflect how this music affected people at the time.
Dress for a funeral, wearing dad's hats. Look like a proper rude boy.
What's a rude boy?
Inside the Happy Trooper, you're gonna find rude boys, skinheads, Zulus. The rude boys come up from Coventry. The skinheads are from White Council Estates and Redditch and Shirley. And the Zulus are mostly from round here. And they're in charge.
Describe the history of two-tone as you see it in this town.
It wasn't a deliberate attempt to unite black and white young people or black and white music. It just happened. We were listening to music which was coming from Jamaica. Prince Buster, like Prince Buster. You had skinheads, traditionally labelled as racist. And you had black youth that go into the same places and listening to the same music. And somehow it worked. It was the music that made sure that these sets of people all came together. That developed into what became known as two-tone music.
There were tensions at the time, city riots. Do you remember it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember the riots in Birmingham in '81.
In Birmingham, police have reported looting and windows being smashed in the Handsworth district. Mrs. Thatcher said the past 10 days of riots had been her most worrying time since she became Prime Minister.
There obviously is some mistrust, and we have to overcome that.
On the news, they were doing a map of Britain with where the riots were happening. It was all over. It really was a time of rebellion, and I think the music was the soundtrack to it. My concern in this piece is more about class, which is sort of very unfashionable, I think, at the moment. But the idea that these young people are very, very, very similar because of where they're from. They all live on the same estate. 1981, when this is set, I was listening to this music and going to the Birmingham City matches, and afterwards someone would turn up with a record player and put the music on, and the whole place would go mad. So it's very important that this is actually shot where it all took place.
And that was the reporting brings us to 4 minutes to 9. And we're going to finish with a thought about Vaughan Gavin, who is going to become Europe's first black leader. His journey to the front line of Welsh politics beginning in Southern Africa in 1974, born in the capital of Zambia, Lusaka. His father was a vet from Old War by Sea. Then at Bridgend, moved out of work. He got used to his mother, who was a chicken farmer, and the rest, as they say, is history. And now there he is, about to become the First Minister of Wales. Lord Woolley is on the line, Simon Woolley, Baron Woolley of Woodford, who was the founder of Operation Black Vote, who was on the board of the Human Rights Commission. He was also himself the first black man to lead an Oxford College. Well, Woolley, good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
It's an odd mix, isn't it? Because we are very, very aware in recent news of racism and racist attitudes, but we're also we are pretty good at doing this now.
Well, this is a great story. A great story for Vaughan, the first black man to lead a country in Europe, actually from African descent. And I'm pleased for him, I'm pleased for Wales, and I'm pleased for Britain. As you said, we do get some things very right. I've known Vaughan for over 25 years and tracked his journey and supported him when I was director of Operation Black Vote. And so it's a great moment. And in contrast, as you alluded to, we've had a pretty wretched week with the politics of race and extremism, and politicians not doing the right thing. And so we've got this contrast that needs to be unpicked.
But when we unpick it, how do we do that? Because do we just simply concentrate on the positive and say, for goodness sake, that's the real story here? Yeah. Or is that not enough?
No, I think we're smart enough to do both. I mean, clearly it's important to have black and brown faces in high places, all over the spectrum. But policy is important. That our legislation, our rhetoric is important. Justin, it's no good having the most diverse looking cabinet in history if you have policies that pit poor white people against poor black people. If we have that type of rhetoric, the rhetoric that says that you haven't got a house because of those one, you haven't got a job because they're taking them. And actually the history is, the reality is so much different. When you look at the nurses, the doctors, the auxiliary workers, the care home workers, shopkeepers, entrepreneurs, it's at its centre, it's teaming diversity that is running this, and we should be proud of that, and ensuring that our rhetoric doesn't divide and rule, but brings us together.
But that rhetoric coming at a moment where so many of our leaders, and not just those in overall charge, but so many of our leaders are from ethnic minority backgrounds. It is their policies, they're in charge.
It's heartbreaking. I thought most of my adult life to get black and brown faces in high places, and I didn't expect them to be at the front line, pitting poor white people against black people for a few grubby votes. We want leadership that brings us together, not divides us.
Lord Willie, Baron Willie of Woodford, thank you very much for talking to us about Vaughan Gething. We hope during one of our visits to Cardiff before long to be talking about it.
And that's all from us. Start the Week is after the news. And thank you for listening today to Justin Webb and Katie Hodgin.
BBC News at 9 o'clock. Britain's most successful female Olympian, Dame Laura Kenny, has announced her retirement from cycling at the age of 31. Dame Laura, who's won 5 Olympic gold medals and 7 World Championship titles, had been targeting a 4th Olympics in Paris this year. But she told the BBC her feelings have changed since she gave birth to her second child in July.
Going on to win another gold medal, as much as I would love to do that, it wasn't giving me the energy that I wanted anymore. Like, it just wasn't. I wasn't thinking, I really want to go on and win one. I was thinking, I really want to stay at home with the children.
The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, has told Conservative MPs speculating about replacing Rishi Sunak to stop it. There have been reports in recent days about some Tory politicians wanting the leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, to lead them into the next election. President Putin says the war in Ukraine and strengthening Russia's armed forces will be his main priorities after he was re-elected in a vote many Western countries have called a sham. Officials in Russia say he secured more than 80% of the vote. The Israeli army says it's gained control of the largest hospital in Gaza after launching a military operation in the area overnight. An IDF spokesperson claimed Hamas fighters had regrouped inside the Shifa hospital, but insisted Israel would keep other Palestinians safe. The Hamas-run health ministry said Israel was committing a war crime. The spending watchdog has warned that a low uptake of heat pumps is slowing progress on cutting emissions from homes. A National Audit Office report says sales will have to increase 11-fold if the government is to achieve its climate change targets. Ministers say they're helping families to install heat pumps rather than forcing them to. The Oscar-winning British-American screenwriter David Seidler has died at the age of 86. One of his best-known films, The King's Speech, was about George VI overcoming his stammer. David Seidler, who himself had a stammer, accepted his Oscar for the film in 2011 on behalf of all the stutterers of the world. BBC News.
This is BBC Radio 4. Good morning, it's Monday morning once again, which means a new book of the week. It's the story of the wartime propagandist Sefton Delmer, and we'll hear lots more about that in just a moment. First though, we'll take a firm grip on the crank handle that sticks out of the front of Monday morning and start the week with Tom Sutcliffe.
Hello. When Stafford Cripps, a member of Churchill's wartime cabinet, found out what one British propagandist had been up to, he reportedly said, "If this is the sort of thing that's needed to win the war, I'd rather lose it." What had shocked him was the graphically pornographic gossip used to sugar the pill of British misdirection, a story that's told in Peter Pomerantsev's book, How to Win an Information War. He joins us this morning on the line from Texas to talk about what past propaganda can tell us about our own susceptibility to fake news and conspiracy theory and possible ways to counter it. Joining him are the tech journalist Charlotte Gee, here to talk about artificial intelligence's ability to forge alternative facts that get in the way of the real ones, and the Ukrainian writer Andrei Kurkov, whose novel The Silver Bone is set in Kyiv in 1919, a world of violently competing worldviews in which acknowledging the wrong reality could easily get you killed. Not an easy place to be a detective, as his hero discovers. And before we talk about that book, Andrei, I just want to ask you all about the Russian election, because we're talking about the faking of appearances and the making of appearances, and this is a huge real-world simulation. Peter, nobody is surprised by this result at all. There are no marginals in Russia, no swing states. So why is it worth it to the Russian state to do this?
So it's essentially a ritual, a show of power, to show First Nations we can fake this, that we have the bureaucratic ability to organise the fakery, and you have to take part in this class. By taking part in this class, you are constituent. So I don't really like the term election. It's a sort of it's a calendar-based